Hi, welcome. My name's Shay Coker. I'm a managing director at Savills based in Miami. Today, my special guest is Steve Berliner, who is a vice chairman of Savills in New York. Welcome, Steve.
Thanks, Shay. Great to be here.
Steve, we both share a couple of passions, tennis and real estate. So tell me how you got involved in tennis first.
So growing up as a public school kid from Queens, tennis was not a very popular sport. So my life until I was around 14 was baseball, track, and bowling leagues, which were the common sports. My older parents are European, they're Holocaust survivors, and they very much like the European sports like tennis, gymnastics, swimming, and soccer, none of which had any appeal to me whatsoever. My older brother played tennis, among other sports. And when I went to summer camp when I was 14 for one particular summer, my older brother convinced the owners to let me do half baseball and half tennis. I played some tournaments that summer in upstate New York and got a very low ranking, but it was enough for my parents to get excited to push me more towards tennis than baseball, which was my first and still is my true love.
Oh, wow. And so you went on to play in college, right? At Penn?
Right. I was captain of the University of Pennsylvania tennis team, graduating in 1979. And I also played squash there my senior year. So I was very fortunate that back in those days, they only wanted to pay one coach and not two for those two sports. So my tennis coach felt that playing lightweight football wasn't a good idea for me and that squash would be a better idea. And he talked me into it. And it's been a passion then and ever since. So I was very fortunate.
Squash is a great game. I played a little bit down in Brazil, but there's not a lot of squash in Texas that I'm aware of growing up. So it's a very intense game. The ball doesn't bounce.
It is. There's actually a fairly active squash community in Dallas and Houston. I know several players from down there, but it's certainly not the sport that you're going to find on any playground. So the fact that I started playing was very funny to my friends growing up because they'd never heard of it. So, but it's been a wonderful thing. It's been great personally, athletically, and professionally because I've met a fantastic group of people through both tennis and squash.
So I missed a part before you went to college. I hear you used to train with one or two kind of famous players.
That's true. Like in many things, I was the black sheep of the family. The people I played a lot with were John McEnroe, who became number one in the world and one of the greatest players of all time. John and I were both Queens boys, so we played with, we carpooled occasionally. We were very good friends. Played basketball with John, football with John. He was a very good athlete. Eric Fromm, who became my doubles partner, my best friend, the junior, he got to 46 in the world. Peter Rennert got to 40 in the world. And then there was me, who grossly underachieved in tennis compared to my peers, but I still love the game, and we're all still in touch, and we still all love each other. In fact, we had a call with a bunch of the guys yesterday. So it's a great community, the tennis and squash communities. So I'm very fortunate to be a part of both.
Well, you know, your tennis schedule is pretty booked. I tried to get a hit with you the other day, and it was booked several days in advance. Is that always the case?
It's actually very unusual for me. I typically don't play winter tennis unless I happen to be in Florida. I haven't played winter tennis in New York in 15 years or so. So when I come down here, I'm like a kid in the candy store because there are more former top 100 pros down here than you could shake a stick at, and they all want to play. And it's really been wonderful. And obviously, this pandemic has been challenging for all of us personally and professionally, but it's been great for my tennis game because I haven't played this much probably since my junior year of college. So it's really been, it hasn't made up for not seeing my children and my granddaughter, but it's made up for certain other things. So yeah, Florida's a fabulous tennis community. So it's a high level problem.
That's right. You, if I've heard correctly, you used to, I don't believe you've gone, you went last year, but how do you pronounce it? The Maccabiah Games?
Maccabiah Games.
Okay, Maccabiah Games, which are one of the largest sporting events in the world in tennis, right? Or no, in everything, right? They do everything.
Yeah, so the Maccabiah Games, in simplistic terms, are the Jewish Olympic Games. The World Games are held in Israel every 4 years. So for me, as the child of Holocaust survivors, my parents met in a DP camp in Germany after the war, got married in Germany, and then came here as soon as my father's hitch in the army was up. He was a spy stationed in Germany. He was actually of Austrian descent. So the rest of my family that survived the concentration camps moved to Israel. So for me, it was an unbelievable opportunity to not only compete, represent the United States, which to me is always a gift, but also to compete in front of my family. So I've been very fortunate with the Maccabiah Games. I played squash in 1993, tennis in 1997, squash in 2005, and then probably the highlight for me was playing squash in 2017 with my son on the open squash team. So we got to travel together, train together, uh, walk into the opening ceremonies with 50,000 people playing the national anthem together, and I got to help coach he and his teammates. So,
That's
as
amazing.
a parent, there's nothing like being able to share these things with your children. So it was really a highlight. And the games are supposed to occur next year again because of the pandemic. Since the Olympic Games were pushed back a year, and we get Olympic athletes to compete in the Maccabiah Games on occasion. So we've pushed our World Games back to 2022 now.
Okay.
And so my son is thinking about playing again. If he plays, then I play. So stay tuned.
There you go. There you go. Then you can play with one of my doubles partners, Todd Rubenstein, who went to the last one.
Well, if I play tennis, maybe he'll be my coach.
Yeah, that's right. He's a good coach.
Indeed, he is.
So let's talk a little bit about real estate. You, how long have you been in it? How did you decide to get into it?
So I entered the real estate business, like a lot of other things in my life, purely by accident. I graduated from Wharton undergrad with an economics degree. I was asked by one of my economics professors if I wanted to get a master's in economics at the London School, and the notion of getting more college loans and becoming an economics professor seemed kind of interesting, but I had no money. I had school loans to pay back. So I went to the insurance industry with a friend of mine who I knew from Penn. 3 years into it, I was basically told I was the most overpaid person in the insurance industry, which I thought was a little depressing since all my friends went to Wall Street and were making 20 times what I was making. And one of my college tennis teammates was a broker at the largest brokerage firm in New York at the time called Helmsley Spear. You may have heard of Harry Helmsley. He was the largest owner of New York real estate, and he also owned a brokerage company. And he said, why don't you take an interview? I think you'd be wonderful at this. You love people and people love you, and you love being creative and doing deals. So I went for an interview, was offered the job on the spot. I was 25 years old, and I said, what do I have to lose? So I jumped in, and it's really been a wonderful career. I've been doing it now for 37 years. I was very fortunate 4 years into my career. My boss felt I had leadership qualities. I was always the captain of every team, and I always believe that you lead by example. So they asked me to consolidate 2 Long Island offices into one and to player manage it. And I just bought a house in Long Island. My daughter had just been born. They were going to pay me a salary for the management role and allow me to continue to do brokerage on Long Island and in New York City. And I said, why not? And it's funny because I was always really good at talking myself out of jobs and things. And I always believe you let your resume do the talking. But I said, let me see if I understand this. You want me to run an office. I'll be the youngest person in the office, including the support staff. I've never done a deal on Long Island, and I've never managed before. Why is this a good idea? They said, you'll be great. You'll be great. And so I tried it, and that was the beginning of a 32-year player management career with the little acquisitions and brokerage in the middle. So it's really been a great career and something that was never even on my radar screen. I knew nothing about Manhattan real estate. Growing up in Queens and not having any money, I had no reason to go into Manhattan. I was always playing ball in a playground someplace. So I really had to learn the city because I knew nothing about it. And, it's a crazy, overwhelming, exciting marketplace. In any market that is three of the four largest central business districts in the United States is a market that you want to be working in. So it's really been great.
So I would hope we're on the tail end of a certain crisis initiated by the coronavirus, lockdowns, et cetera. A lot of people have predicted big things with office real estate, that it could be the end of office real estate, that people are so used to working from home that they have all the technology that they can do it. You also seen some protests in New York that have destroyed some retail real estate. I know you've lived through some ups and downs in the market. What do you think will happen, and based on your experience?
Right. So I think you have to look at these events in a historical perspective. I ran the largest commercial brokerage office in Lower Manhattan, 9/11, and watched jumpers jumping out the World Trade Center. I was directly across the street. I saw the second plane fly into the South Tower. I was literally 100 yards away. In fact, I'm standing there like this watching the fireball go over the top of my building. So we were on the 45th floor of One Liberty Plaza, which is a 52-story building. So the fact we weren't all incinerated is kind of amazing. But I was hearing a lot of the same things that I'm hearing today. Who would ever go downtown again? Right? The market is going to be dead. No one's ever going to lease space above the 10th floor of an office building ever again. And there was a lot of fear, rightfully so. It was such a horrific event, the worst tragedy on U.S. soil in our history. And it's terrifying because that's what terrorism is supposed to be, not to know where it's coming from and to get people to change their behaviors. But here we are now, 20 years later. All the Trade Center buildings are rebuilt. They're all mostly tenanted. You have tenants who are going downtown who never were downtown before, fashion tenants, technology tenants. The residential population is 15 times larger than it was pre 9/11. And they built a bustling retail environment downtown. So they built the Calatrava Center for Transportation, which was always an issue downtown. So again, were there changes? Sure. Every building put in security gates. There's a lot more security so people can't go in the building. But aside from that, downtown is a thriving metropolis, as the third largest central business district in the United States should be. So when I think about this pandemic and I hear a lot of the same things, now the conversation is everyone's going to work from home. You never have to be in an office again. I just find that understandable, but not really logical. I think there are a lot of benefits for being able to work remotely. Look, I'm certainly not in New York City right now, but I'm doing an interview and talking to clients every day. But the reality is there's a place for working at home and there's a place for being in an office. So having talked to lots of tenants over the past 3 months, what's clear to me is certain tenants are going to take more space to accommodate the space requirements. As an example, Microsoft, who historically has given 170 square feet per employee, now wants to go to 300 square feet per employee, so they'll probably take more space. Amazon is talking about taking more space. Conversely, you have Morgan Stanley CEO saying, I'll never lease another square foot again. And the one that's most ironic to me is Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook saying he's going to cut his footprint in half, as he just leased 1.5 million square feet last year in Hudson Yards and is about to sign another 740,000 square foot lease at the Farley Center. So, I think it's very politically correct to be talking about that. But at the end of the day, you and I chose a business because we like people and we like to interact. And as much as I enjoy being in Florida, I truly miss the office. I truly miss being with my clients face to face. And I think that there's a lot of pent up demand. I could see it in Florida. As soon as they reopened Florida, we went into Delray to pick up some food for dinner from one of the restaurants that we enjoy, that we're trying to support for takeout. Delray was packed. Every restaurant was packed. The street was packed. People like to live their lives, and we don't want to live scared. That's why we're in the United States. So So yes,
Sure.
do I think there'll be changes? Sure. I think that certain companies will take more space than they had before. I think certain companies will take a little bit less space and figure out what employees can work effectively remotely, even if it's just 1 or 2 days a week. And I think other companies will consider bifurcating operations. So instead of having 50,000 feet in New York, maybe we'll have 30 in New York, 10 in Connecticut, and 10 in New Jersey, allowing people to work from those offices either full-time or part-time. But office buildings aren't going away. We're going to be here a long time. And look, having spent so much of my career as a manager, it's important for me to see what my people are doing. It's important to see what everyone has issues. I like walking around the floor. How are you doing? How can I help? And I think people like to have leadership. So it's hard working alone. You really have to be very organized. You still have to have downtime. You have to listen to the workplace people. I've learned a lot because working remotely for me has been a challenge because it's just not the way I'm wired. I would say the same would go for you.
Yeah.
So it's a challenge, but we'll get through this. The saying I keep using is that this too shall pass. And this has been a very difficult chapter. But remember, we were hearing similar things after the SARS epidemic, after the Ebola epidemic, after the financial crisis, after the dot-com crash. We're the United States. We recover. We take the challenge, we accept it, and we power through. And I see us doing the same thing here. And I for one, can't wait to get back to the office.
Yeah. Me too. You've been at Savills for several years now, and you've obviously done some smaller transactions and some larger ones. What are some of the one or two of the larger transactions that are a highlight in your career, and how is it different from a typical transaction?
Right. So I'll talk about one deal in particular, which was a very interesting, complex, and exciting transaction. And that's when we were retained by Mizuho Bank, one of the 10 largest banks in the world, based in Japan, who were arguably the largest tenant in New York that no one really knew about. They historically had grown through acquisition, so they had 5 different locations in the city. So no one really understood how big they were because they had chunks of space in various buildings. And we were hired along with a fantastic team of Mitch Steer, who's our CEO, Matt Barlow, head of New York Consulting, David Goldstein, who's a board member, vice chairman, terrific broker, Gabe Marins, who works with David. We put together an incredibly strong team with lots of resources to do their consolidation, which meant moving the trading operation and several of their subsidiary companies with the headquarters. And then ultimately what happened was they ended up bifurcating their headquarters in 2 buildings across the street from each other. So it was a great conclusion. It was a 3-year project. It ended up being about 400,000+ square feet of work, a very long-term lease. And it just took an extraordinary effort by everyone involved to get it done. And it was just certainly the highlight of my career in terms of deals, because a lot of the business that I do is relationship driven. A lot of real estate companies, a lot of private equity companies, legal firms, some nonprofits. So this one was really exciting because it was not a Savills, or at the time Savills Studley relationship. So we beat out our 2 largest competitors who had controlled that account for a very long time. But we got to do the big deal, and it was just a great team effort. Make me very proud to be at the premier tenant rep firm in the world. So it was just a great learning experience for me, frankly, as well as a wonderful opportunity to work with a friend, and very, very exciting.
That's awesome. So outside of tennis, which has probably your tennis game has probably improved tremendously over the last few weeks, is there something that you can take from this time at home or in Florida to going forward?
Yeah, so I think there are always lessons to be learned from these types of events. Being the child of Holocaust survivors, as I've said, the one thing I've learned in life is don't ever take anything for granted, because you just never know when things could be taken from you. none of us ever imagined that they would literally close the country down for months. So I think a lot of the things that we do take for granted, really silly things like going out to eat with a friend, going to your club to hit tennis balls or squash balls, or just to work out in the gym. I think I've always loved those moments. And I think now they'll be even more special because I haven't seen my kids for 3 months. I haven't seen my granddaughter except on Zoom and FaceTime. So I think every moment that we spend with our friends, with our family, with our clients is very special and important time. And just recognize that we're very fortunate to be able to do what we do. Yeah, and it allows us the flexibility to do other things. Again, with my tennis game, it was a pretty low bar, so I'm glad I'm playing better than when I got here. But
you're very modest.
Well, I think the important thing for me is, and even when raising my children, I always believed the way my parents did as a typical child of Europeans, that you really need to have balance in your life. And I think these are the moments where balance really is important. So when I say balance, academics, not when I was really young, but as I got older, became very important to me. Athletics were very important to me. Playing music was very important. We all played music. Charitable work, giving back, obviously in today's times with these horrible occurrences that are happening around the country, the protests, which I'm all in favor of, the violence I'm not in favor of. But these are times to really look in the mirror and recognize that we can all do better. I've spent a lot of time and my own resources doing charity work in my whole career. It was something great to be by my father, who didn't have any money, but he was very involved in the Masonic Lodge and the Rotary, giving back to underprivileged kids. So I've been fortunate to be able to be involved in underprivileged kid charities like the City Parks Foundation in New York, where Billie Jean King is the chairman. McEnroe used to be the co-chairman, but he decided to open up his own similar charity. Street Squash, which is a squash program we do for underprivileged kids in Harlem. There are other programs like that around the country, which I support. And it really just shows you that we all have a lot of work to do as a country to get it right. Look, I think, it's the greatest country in the world, but like everything else, there are things that we can and should strive to do better. So, look, it's a little bit scary in New York right now. I obviously get all the updates. I'm not a fan of violent protest. I don't think that the people who are doing the violence are in fact protesters at all. I think they're looking for an excuse to behave badly, and I hope they all get put where they belong. For the protests, I think it's important. They need to be heard. I'm very proud that my daughter co-heads the diversity program at her company, Indeed. Very proud of all that she's doing to work with minorities and women to get equal rights in this country, which we know is all important. You're an immigrant like I'm an immigrant's kid, and we're very lucky that we could come here and live wonderful lives, and everyone should have that same opportunity.
Yeah, that's true. And being back in the U.S. for after 14 years in Brazil is refreshing. So it's amazing to see how well we have it here.
My parents came here. Neither of them had graduated high school. They came here in 1947 through Ellis Island. They settled in Queens. They both got jobs because they didn't have any money, no family. And yet in the first generation, both of their children graduated Ivy League schools. And we were not rich. We were a middle-class Queens family. I'm very proud of the fact that we got financial aid and I took out school loans for the rest. I turned down a lot of athletic scholarship offers because my parents felt if the University of Pennsylvania and the Ivy League was dumb enough to want me, that we should try to make that work. And it was hard because I was offered a lot of athletic scholarships, which would have made life a lot easier. And I would have felt, frankly, probably more comfortable because I felt kind of like the poor kid at Penn, which was unfortunate. I never really went out. I never spent money. My parents, have fun. I said, I'm working hard. I'm having fun. I'm playing sports and I'm studying and met my wife at Penn. So Penn was a great thing. But, there are choices in life that you make. And for me, the opportunity to graduate from the Wharton Business School, which was beyond my parents' wildest dreams. And frankly, I'd never heard of the Wharton School because what did I know? Jamaica High School, we didn't talk a lot about the Wharton School. So, I took my college loans. I paid them back very proudly. It took about 10 years to pay them back after I graduated. And that last check that I wrote was a very exciting and proud moment. So,
That's
life
awesome.
life is about choices. And I made a lot of stupid ones, but fortunately that was a good one. But, in life, you learn from your mistakes. And fortunately for me, I made so many. I became truly intellectual learning from my mistakes because I made so many dumb mistakes. But it ended up okay.
Glad to hear that I'm not the only one. So
yeah, well, look, I always tell my children, if you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough, and I truly believe that. Life is about seeing where your potential can take you, and it doesn't mean that you're going to be the richest person in the cemetery or winning Wimbledon. It's everyone has different talent levels, and I certainly never had a killer instinct, which certainly didn't help me in sports very much. I love to compete, but I could deal with losing better than I probably should have. I guess I got used to it after a while, but lots of life lessons. And this pandemic and these protests are more lessons, because we all have to learn.
Yeah. Steve, thanks a lot for joining me. It's very interesting to hear some of your experience.
Well, my pleasure. It's always great to share, and I look forward to seeing you on the tennis court soon. Maybe you and Todd.
All right.
Do a little damage.
All right, we'll do it.
Shay, thanks so much.
Thank you, Steve. Take care.
Best of luck. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.